Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny meeting. First, some housekeeping notes. I'd like to point out that the emergency exits are over there and there. There are no fire drills planned for this evening, so if the alarms go off, it's for real. I would also ask all members and officers to please ensure that their phones are either on silent or vibrate so that we have no interruptions, please. That also includes iPads if possible. I'd like to welcome to our meeting the Cabinet member who has come along, Councillor Bainham, thank you. Oh, sorry, members, sorry. So, Councillor Franklin and Councillor Bainham, thank you for coming. I'd also like to thank directors, Dom and Paul, and I'd also like to thank the officers, so Nick, Liz, Jacqueline, for having come in tonight, and I apologise, it's going to be quite late, and Sam over there. I always assume that Sam is on the right hand of Dom, so, so they come as a package. Apologies for absence. According to my listing, I've got Nick Rant, Jonathan Taylor, Liz Kitchen and Belinda Walters. Have I missed anybody?
Liz Kitchen, Jonathan Taylor, Belinda Walters, Councillor Bevis,
Okay. Councillor Bevis and Councillor Campbell, who's had an op. Sorry, good reason why he can't be in. Sorry, John? Okay. Thank you for that. I take it that you've ordered the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on November the 6th, 2024. Can I take it that members of the committee agree that these are the record of the correct meetings minutes? And if that's the case, can I have a proposer and a seconder for approving the minutes as they are presented to you this evening? Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Livingston, thank you. So I will propose and seconder. Are all the members of the committee in agreement? Can I show hands? Great. Thank you. I've initialed them. Thank you. Item 3. Declarations of members' interests. Do any members have a declaration of interest or need to register an expression of declaration of interest in relation to agenda items? Please say. If not, we will move on. No? Thank you. Announcements. There are no announcements from the Chief Executive. The only announcement that I have is that the Working Party on the BESS has met twice now. I'd like to thank Councillor Len Ellis-Brown for chairing this group, and we had a very productive meeting with West Sussex County Council Fire and Rescue, and the progress on this task and finish is ongoing. That's the only announcement I have to make. Item 5. Item 5, this is a review of the Council's budget and medium-term financial strategy. We will receive a report from Dom? Okay, from the Director of Resources, Dom Bradley, and also the Cabinet member, Councillor Bainham, is here in attendance, and will be speaking or at least answering questions, I presume. I know that a number of questions have been raised on item 5, which have been partially answered by the Director of Resource, and no doubt he will weave into his presentation the answers to other questions and those questions as well that might have been presented to the officers and the Cabinet member on this topic. So thank you, Dom and Councillor Bainham, for answering the questions of the committee and for doing this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the budget for 25-26. We'll start on the. Okay, this is the budget for 25-26, starting on the 1st of April, and the medium-term financial strategy, which is, as it has been over the last 3 or 4 years, probably quite uncertain into the future, and all the talk of local government reorganisation makes it even more uncertain than it was before. So that's the context. And we received our provisional settlement in December, and I suppose it does two things. It gives us a clearest indication yet about the funding for the future and the talk of the multi-year settlement, but it also gives us an indication of 25-26 itself. So if we take that individual year first, the core spending power remains the same. It's a 0% increase. And government defines core spending power as what we raise locally through council tax and all the government grants that they give us. So the overall envelope has remained the same. The difference, I suppose, is that we have put up, or intend to put up, our council tax by 2.99%, and that's the government expectation that we do that. So actually the envelope has stayed the same. The portion that we raise locally has increased by around £500,000, and the amount government is giving us has gone down by £500,000, so the same envelope. And this is a theme, because when you look at the differences across different areas of the country and different organisations, the northern, urban, and this is a factual statement rather than a political statement, Labour areas are getting 6% increases in core spending power, and the rural, southern, other areas, let's call it, are getting 0% increases. The government has guaranteed in 25-26 that no area will lose money, but that assurance definitely doesn't exist in 26-27 and the future. So there's a clear indication there, isn't there, about the direction of funding that we will receive in this area for the medium-term financial strategy. And I half joked earlier today, actually, with some people about the future of that multi-year settlement. So we will get a 3-year settlement, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what that is and how they will manage that. And actually, it's quite easy to have a settlement of not very much, nothing and nothing set out for us, which may well be the case if we're being very pessimistic. But I hope that we will receive at least something there in the future. We will find out about the future years probably later in the spring. But for now, let's concentrate on 25-26, and I will weave in some of the questions that I've received, and they were largely on the 3 key areas of uncertainty. And we're talking here about the employer national insurance increase and the impacts of any funding. We're talking here about food waste as well, although technically that doesn't quite kick in until 26-27. And we're talking about the extended producer responsibility grant as well. And I'm sure lots of you will have questions on those 3 areas. So I'll try and set that out as simply as I can and as succinctly as I can. So for the employer national insurance increase, government haven't told us exactly what they are going to give us on this. We will find out in the first week of February at the final settlement stage. They have shared, though, a general formula so far. Not exactly helpful. And Pixel, who are our sort of funding government experts in this area, have put some data together. They won't have the complete data set. They won't know exactly what it is. But the estimated cost for us is around about £500,000. Their calculations have come out at around, we might receive funding of around £200,000. It may, of course, be more, but we'll find out shortly. But we are working with those numbers at the moment, and of course we will know by the time we get to council, we will know the exact number, and we can recorrect if we need to within the report and approve that. The difference will be made up from other government parts of funding that we do get anyway. So there's a grant called the floor funding grant, and we will use that to compensate for it in the future. But of course, that temporary funding grant, that floor funding grant that guarantees us no reduction, may not be in existence in the future, and we will still be left with this £500,000 cost per year on national insurance contributions. So that's the first area. The second area is food waste, and we have now, and the report refers to it, received the implementation funding. So £307,000 will be received before the end of this financial year, that we will put into the food waste earmarked reserve and brought into 25-26 as income, i.e. using that reserve, along with the other £121,000 that government will give us in 25-26. And we've looked at that, and it should cover a good proportion of the implementation costs. So that's relatively good news. And let's just remind ourselves on the funding that they gave us for the capital side of things. So they gave us £1.5 million on the capital funding, and that was for all the caddies and the vehicles and all those things. and we think the cost in total will be around about £2.6 million. So there was a shortfall there. And as yet, the most important bit for me at least is the ongoing revenue costs for food waste, and they are estimated at the moment at around about £2 million per year, and we've heard absolutely nothing on whether we are going to get any ongoing revenue costs funding from government, or if we do, how much that may be. But if you refer back to the capital side of things, we got about half to 2/3, and it's quite probable that we won't get all the funding on food waste that will match our costs. We have, though, got something called the Extended Producer Responsibility Payments, £2.3 million, and government have specifically said that that Extended Producer Responsibility Payment isn't part of any core spending power calculation in 25-26. Now, they've been quite specific about that. And of course, that leads you on to, well, what about in 26-27? And maybe that will become part of the overall funding package allocations in the future. And the sort of the thinking at the moment is that actually this could replace any food waste funding instead. Now, there are two things there. So it will probably cover it in the short term. That's fine, isn't it? But actually, as producers change their packaging behaviour, it's quite probable that actually the grant that we get decreases, and as we know, the cost of food waste will only increase because salaries increase, because fuel increases, because we need replacement vehicles, etc. So I suspect that those two will diverge. So in 25-26, it looks okay. We have this additional funding, but it's ominous for the future when you look at the medium term. Of course, the medium term is clouded by the fact that the local government reorganisation will have an impact here in some form. We don't quite know what that looks like yet. It could be irrelevant, couldn't it, for us for the future years of 29-30, for example, at the end of the medium-term financial strategy. But we can only plan on the basis of the information that we know at the moment. And of course, we revise the MTFS regularly, and we will do so during the year as and when we find out more. The final bit that I just wanted to sort of point you towards is obviously I've spoken here about revenue, but there are two areas of the budget each year, and the capital is the sort of the lesser, less popular area, but it's still an important area, and we are proposing here to commit to £15.5 million worth of capital expenditure, which is of course quite ambitious. And this doesn't include anything on Highwood yet, and that's later on in the agenda. And it doesn't include anything on the local authority housing fund, around 3.5, should we get any funding for that. Again, we'll talk about that afterwards as well. So that's a sizable sum to be committing to. It's worth noting that a few of those give a financial return. Obviously, there are social and environmental reasons for doing capital expenditure. We have, a property team that is coming back to, sort of full capacity and getting back on its feet properly. We have capacity issues in general from project management. We have the impact of local government reorganisation, which may have an impact on staff, on morale, on people leaving, finding it even harder to recruit and retain. And of course, I'm pointing that out and reminding you here at ONS that if we are going to sign up to such an ambitious programme, obviously to be gentle when you're beating me up for not delivering it next year. So that's all I wanted to say to sort of signpost you to the big areas within the report. Obviously happy to take any questions, and Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, thank you, with the Chair's permission.
Yep.
Thank you. I think that's a pretty good exposition of what's in front of you today. As ever with these things, the government gives with one hand and takes with the other. A classic example is on the floor funding grant, which is reduced by the amount that they expect we will additionally raise in council tax if we raise it by the full amount. In other words, it gives you very little choice, room for manoeuvre there. Other points, you mentioned national insurance. Well, I was at a local government conference just last week, and it was addressed by Jim McMahon, who's the Minister of State at the Ministry of Housing, Local Communities and Government, MHCLG. And he confirmed that the amount that was put aside for compensation for national insurance contributions was £5 billion across the country. However, the LGA have done their own sums and estimated that the total cost is 6.5 million. So there is a shortfall there before you even start. And that's on the direct costs. Of course, increasing national insurance also has an effect on our costs because we work with suppliers, we work with other organisations. They all have to increase their payments on national insurance, and they will pass those on to their clients if we're one of those clients. So that's a hidden expense of that rise. Food waste, I think Dom has talked about that quite a lot already. Although it's not specific in the settlement about the 2.3 million being applied to food waste, that's what everybody is taking it as. And indeed, at that same conference, which was attended by my counterparts across the country and Dom's counterparts and various chief execs, etc., everybody took the same approach. And if I was to take a different approach, I would find myself in a minority of one, which would probably not be a very comfortable place to be. So that's for that. And the other thing I think to point out is that although it's, as Dom has mentioned, a neutral position, so we haven't got the sort of 6% rise that some other boroughs and districts have had, it's actually less than neutral because it takes no account of inflation. So if inflation is 2.5%, 3%, then that's a cost that we've lost out on. And that's the way it's going for the future. The one thing we did learn at this conference, and it came the first time I'd heard it directly from the Minister, was the commitment to the multi-year settlement would actually start next year. So although the uncertainty may be taken away, the gloom may not. And I think that's probably the only additions I would like to say, but obviously I'm happy to take questions as is done.
Thank you, Councillor Bainham. Councillor Lynn Ellis-Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bainham's made the point I was going to make, that in real terms, if you're going to be zero in real terms, it's actually a loss. The thing my question really is, can residents opt out of food waste collection? Is that, I don't know if there's a saving there if you did, because you're still going to have to go to the house next door perhaps, but can you opt out so I don't need a bin, etc.?
I think we'll pass that one on to Paul Anderson.
So we are legally required to provide a service to every household in the district. Not every household will participate, and if they choose not to participate, there's no penalty. But we have to. There's no opt-out available to reduce our costs.
So if I speak from my experience, I was provided with a brown bin, which is about as much use as a chocolate fireguard where I live, because of the amount of garden material that I produce. So you came and you took, before I was on the council, the council came and took a brown bin away. So if I don't want a food waste bin, can I just say, sorry, don't give me a food waste bin?
Honestly, I think the administration of knowing that number 32 want one and number 37 don't would be disproportionately expensive. So people would tend to use it in their shed for keeping stuff in.
Sorry, you've seen where I put the brown bin then, have you?
Any other questions? Sure, there must be some. Councillor Trollope. So was that a statement or a question? I think it's fair to say that the cost of a green waste bin is relatively cheap compared to a lot of other places. However, we did increase, correct me if I'm wrong, the price of the second bin to the same price as the first bin, whereas before it was discounted. So we have upped the rate. But I mean, that's the point you need to make with the cabinet member and your cabinet.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, I mean, it's historically been quite low, but we did put it up last year. We've put it up again this year. And, you know, there will be scope, I think, probably in future years to do similar things. But just because you've got a brown bin doesn't mean to say that you're, you know, in the top echelons of financial security. But it's a judgment call. But you've got to, if you put them up too much, then you may find people dropping out of the scheme. So there's some options on that. But I think on balance, I mean, we looked at putting them higher, lower, and this was the figure we settled on. And that was the agreement of all the people, of all my cabinet colleagues as well.
I think to add to that comment, two things really is that it has been put up regularly. The second thing is, don't forget, just because you have a brown waste bin doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a lot of money. I mean, people who have brown waste bins often enough have got big gardens. So yes, you're right, but it's not exclusively a prerogative of people who have more money. And I think the other point is, you're doing it also to keep people from stuffing garden waste in the waste bin, if you see what I'm trying to say. And there is part of that exercise as well, because otherwise you're going to find people stuffing stuff where they shouldn't go. Councillor Livingston?
Yeah, the Director of Resources painted quite a gloomy picture. Would he recommend that we cut or trim our capital expenditure at this time, our forecast? Obviously, it's a political decision, but you're talking about £15 million, which will mean we'll also lose the revenue from, you know, Treasury use of some of that money.
Maybe I can come in there.
I was just going to apologise for being gloomy, but I'm afraid that's my role in the council. But go on, Mark. You go.
The Director of Resources is there to keep our feet on the ground, as I will comment on later on, but Councillor Bainham may have a point to make.
Yeah, I think it'd be very unlikely that the Director of Resources would look favourably on any capital expenditure that didn't have an income generation part of it. But there are things that we do, that we provide as services, which we don't necessarily have to do, but our residents look to us to provide it, and those are, you know, when we spend money on the park, when we spend money on the Capitol Theatre, when we buy Bamber Brooks, all those things have costs associated with them and don't increase our revenue. So he's right to be cautious, because, you know, he's the Section 1.151 officer for this council, and he would be failing in his statutory responsibility if he didn't point those things out. But as you say, Dennis, these things in the end come down to political decisions about what we want to do to improve the lives of our residents, and, you know, what they see is what they want us to do and what they don't.
Councillor Circus?
I'm not sure. I don't take a diametrically opposite view to Dennis on this. it was Maynard Keynes who said, when the facts change, I change my mind. And the facts have changed quite considerably. And they will change even more, definitely, when we get a response from the Secretary of State on cancelling this year's county council elections. I mean, it's clear to me that the sensible approach is to do as much as we can to finance as many projects as we can in the district while we've got the opportunity, and before the government comes along and passes legislation to stop us doing it, in order to what you might call legacy. Very soon, because these things, if the government is going to stick to this sort of timetable, we're going to be moving very, very fast indeed. And what we need to start thinking about is our legacy and preserving as much of what has been built up for the benefit of residents. And I would be inclined to think that might lead us to revise our view about some expenditure in an upwards direction on the basis that we want to preserve as much as we can of the infrastructure, of the things that have come out time and time again as being the benefits that people see in living in Horsham and Horsham district. And so I think at some stage we're going to have to think very carefully about whether we need a whole new approach that is based on legacy planning. I can't think of a better way of describing it than calling it legacy planning.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers.
I share those similar concerns, Chairman. Is there a danger that you might not be able to answer that, but under devolution, that our healthy reserves might be taken away from us and we won't be able to spend them on local infrastructure? I mean, I have a sincere worry about the fact that, once this unitary system is in place, that those councils that have been prudent and have got good financial standing won't be spending their own money on their own facilities. I don't know if you can answer that.
It might be unfair, or Councillor Bain.
Well, in short, no, I can't really answer that right now. But if you look at the logic of what you're saying, if we team up in a unitary with, if, for example, we teamed up with Worthing and Ada, who are a substantial deficits, then it would all go into the unitary pot.
That's exactly my worry.
Yeah. So I think. So it reminds me of that film Brewster's Millions. But we will take a responsible and reasoned approach to it. We're not obviously going to waste any money. Yeah.
Councillor Bateman.
I'm just assuming that what we may view as a legacy project may quite as easily be labelled a vanity project, and I imagine the kibosh might be put on anything that's seen as such.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Jeffrey? Oh, sorry.
Just going to come back on the delivery side. So a lot of my points that I was making were about capacity to be able to deliver. But a lot of the points that I was actually making wasn't necessarily against spending it. It's about capacity to be able to spend it. So the sort of reticence, maybe, if you like, and the gloominess is around historical performance of spending 7-8 millions each year, and our ambition, which might be 15.5 million or 20 million or 30 million, is all very well to be able to say, yes, we want to spend 30 million pounds, but it's having the capacity and the officers and the planning and everything else that goes with it to actually deliver it. So that was, a point worth bearing in mind, I think.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. A question regarding the new homes bonus. I noticed in the report that as the scheme as it is going to be ending. My question is, have the new government indicated whether they're considering any form of a replacement scheme, bearing in mind the considerable financial pressures that councils are under, including the, especially with the new housing targets in the new MPPF, that's obviously going to lead, without a replacement scheme, to a loss of council revenue. And unless I've missed it in the report, in which case I apologise, do we know how much that may be that we may be missing out on without a replacement scheme in place?
So governments haven't been that impressed with the way that New Homes Bonus hasn't delivered the housing. So they want to end that scheme and start something else. I'm sure this government will have an idea of what it wants to do. It hasn't shared that idea with us at this stage in how it might be calculated and how it might actually deliver housing. And therefore we have no idea at the moment what that scheme looks like or how much we might get from a scheme like that, if anything. So one would hope that in the consultation about how it might look in a multi-year settlement, that will be one element of that envelope and parcel. But we don't know what it looks like, and we probably won't find out until spring at the earliest.
Thank you.
If I could probably just add to that, if I may. And if they brought in something as a replacement to New Homes Bonus, you could guarantee that they would compensate that by a reduction in the floor funding grant.
Councillor Perry?
It's a nuance really, but I was interested in the recommendation about the 112,000 green reserve, which comes up. And I wasn't around when that tree replacement scheme was put in place, so I'm not entirely aware of the history, but I think possibly changing it for the Community Climate Fund isn't quite the same thing, and maybe we can make sure that the nature side of that is being used when they allocate those grant funds. I don't know. Is that a possibility?
So it's not
It makes sense, the question, or not?
Yes, it does. I think it's about delivering outcomes, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the outcomes from the community grant scheme seems to have driven a higher impact on carbon reduction, if you like, from emissions, and therefore spending it on trees hasn't been as effective as perhaps we thought it might have been back in 2019.
It's not just about the carbon, is it, when you plant trees? So
Correct. So it's a balance, isn't it? So what we're looking to do here is, I think, redistribute the pot slightly. I don't know, and I can't recall the detail whether that's the entirety of that area, but it's a sizable chunk of that funding that was going to be allocated for this is now going to something else that we think will extend the life and do more or have more of an impact of spending that money. But obviously the nuance will be you putting that view to the head of sustainability, for example, and talking and discussing her plans for what might happen to the other area.
Any other questions or comments, Ron? No? I have some. I didn't actually know that other people were going to raise some of the points that I did, so I actually made it a bit more formal. I mean, I wish to comment on the budget and the medium-term financial strategy because there are a number of points I want to make. I don't intend to call in the budget in the formal sense of the word, which I would be able to do, but I think an opportunity has been missed. I'm disappointed in this present budget. I fully understand that, normally speaking, we would do a conservative, no political pun intended, I'm using it in the original sense, and a cautious budget to manage and husband our resources, particularly CapEx, for example. And as I have said, and has been said, the Director of Resource does a splendid job of keeping our feet on the ground. I fully get the point made by the Director of Resources to me previously, and he's just done it now, that we are capacity limited in terms of perspective of capital projects because of staffing issues. This is one of the reasons why in the past we've always struggled to meet our budgets in terms of CapEx expenditure. However, in view of the fact that this government is looking to abolish district councils, these are not normal times. So business as usual, I think, is not business as usual. I think we're missing an opportunity here to invest, to protect some of those items or create some of those things that we hold precious, that under a unitary authority they would either not be funded or they would not be interested to fund. This is why I would ask the Cabinet and the leader to re-examine quickly the capital programme with the Director of Resource to see what particular projects that are precious to our residents and to us as councillors that we could, ceteris paribus, or for those who don't understand, all things being equal, get on with and invest over the next 2 years. We need to do this before the government comes out with a statutory instrument that prevents us from doing this sort of thing. I've checked, and the Cabinet has ample time to come up with a review of this course of action between now and the formal Cabinet meeting at the end of February, Council meeting at the end of February, which will endorse the Cabinet decisions. Just because we don't have the resources to do the capital project now doesn't mean that that issue cannot be resolved. We can hire a consultant or consultants or retired members of staff to help us do it, or get the engineering support to support a slate of expanded capital projects. I think you get my points, and I hope the Cabinet and the leader take this away and work on it immediately. My view is you plan for the worst and hope for the best, and I think we should look at our capital project and basically line it up in terms of budget. Even if we can't deliver, we won't give Dom a hard time, but we should at least get it in the books so that they can't take it away from us. Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to add a comment to that, but I did actually feel quite strongly about it, as you can tell. So then,
I would support you on that, Paul. I think we should be looking at what we can do. We are constrained by resources, but that would be part of our resource planning, and that would determine the additional cost of delivering a project within a certain time frame, and whether it becomes viable. But I think we should be mindful that there are things that we should be doing that are social benefit to our community, that doesn't necessarily give us the return on investment that we might want if we were a commercial operation. And I think that would be a good legacy for us, and especially for our community. So I would be supportive of that, Paul. But we do need to go through the resource capacity planning to make sure that it is viable and the costs are not disproportionate to the benefit that is derived.
thank you. What I wanted to point out is that other districts don't have things like the Bramber Brooks thing, like the Henfield Common. They don't have big areas of green open spaces like we do. Mid Sussex basically doesn't have any decent parks. They've got parks, yes, but nothing like we have in terms of our green agenda. And I think we need to preserve that, because I'm sure it'll be for the chop. Councillor Bateman.
It's just to say, I'm not disagreeing with you in any shape or form. I do actually share many of those sentiments. My only worry is that we also have in this region issues with social housing and not having enough social housing. We have many people who are in crisis and in severe financial hardship. So I'm sort of cautioning that we remember that and take that on board and make sure that we're not seen to be frittering away money while people are suffering.
I can answer that one, because we have £7 to £8 million of S106 money set aside to provide that sort of affordable housing and to look for investment, which we are doing. So we're not frittering away money. We have 106 funding that is available for that. I think £7 or £8 million is quite a lot of money. So just to set your mind at rest. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brown said what I was going to say, but just to clarify, are you suggesting that if this goes into the budget, that it's less likely that it'll be stopped, that we've got it programmed in to spend?
The way I'm going with it in the logic is, if it's in the budget, then it is more difficult for somebody to take it away from us, whereas if it is in unallocated funds or not in ring-fence funds, then it is easier for them to take it away. The whole raison d'être of ring-fence funds is to identify those funds for specific things. And that, I think, would make it much more difficult. Dom, you might wish to correct me, probably.
Obviously, we are only setting here, aren't we, a 25-26 capital programme. Future years are indicative unless it's a project that spans more than 1 year. And of course, the second observation that I would make is you can add to the capital programme at any point during a year. It doesn't have to be done at January and February time for the for the start of the year. Obviously, you then reduce the length of time you have in the year to deliver it. But of course, you could decide to do a project that spans a year and a half, and you can decide that at any point during a year. So there is no immediacy for a knee-jerk piling in of capital sort of resource into this. And the other thing I would say clearly, as my role as CFO, I need to remind you of the need for value for money in everything that we spend at all times, in any circumstance.
Councillor Trollope.
Yeah, so if you look at, sorry, can I? Yeah, if you look at this year's forthcoming budget, the Billingshurst Infrastructure Fund is a total amount of around 2.5 million, 1.5 million from existing 106 and SIL funds, and a further 1 million which is being put into the fund from reserves, 500,000 this year, and a further 500,000 the following year. So it's there in the budget for this year, and will be part of the capital programme for next year as well.
And to be crystal clear. Crystal clarity on that.
From my perspective, it is safe. I mean, how can you be completely definite about anything in an uncertain world? But I'm as more certain about that than I am about most certainties.
Any other questions? Councillor Sir, sorry. Do you want to come back, Mark, or Councillor?
Well, maybe I'll come back at the end. Can I do
Okay,
that?
fine.
Dom is quite right to warn us about the fact that expenditure's got to just be justified against normal local government requirements. But one of the things we may be looking to do, of course, is trying to find ways to shift assets to parish councils and potentially to a new town council for Horsham. Now, I wonder whether Dom can give us some clue at this stage as to how possible that's going to be, or how at risk are we of tripping up over what's acceptable expenditure of money. I'm thinking about car parks, for example. We might want to talk to some parishes about transferring car parks, which would of course be a substantial loss of income. We have been through this before. I was talking to former councillor Ray Dorr, who appears to be quite clued up on what the implications were when Chanctonbury Rural District Council was dissolved as part of the 1974 reorganisation, and certain assets were transferred to Storrington and Sullington Parish Council. So we may be able to, hook into some of that experience, but I wonder whether Dom can give us some general feeling about something that we will be looking at, undoubtedly, if this reorganisation goes ahead, which is trying to transfer assets away from a potential unitary authority in order to safeguard those assets from being closed down or reduced by an incoming unitary authority.
It is something we will certainly be looking at. The council, though, would still retain a responsibility, wouldn't it, to get on a disposal, if you like, the best value that it can do. And it would be difficult to give, a big asset away for free. So you would have to get either the Secretary of State's approval for disposal of that to a different body, and the Secretary of State may be finding himself, weighed down across the country with lots of pieces of paper landing on his desk to sign off, or you have to realise it for some financial money, i.e. selling that to a parish. That can be, a complex and difficult task, but ones that we should certainly explore. And of course, some of the assets that we have on our books, for example, the Capitol Theatre, let's call it, it is technically an asset, it is owned by us, it's a building, isn't it? But actually, I call that a liability because we fund it to the tune of £375,000 a year. So, the question could be asked, couldn't it, whether someone wants to take on a responsibility of an asset that costs you that. But obviously it has a financial, valuation in the book as well, doesn't it? So there are lots of different complex matters around how we do it and can we do it and when do we do it. I suspect government will start to clamp down on that in the future, and obviously the closer we get to any date in the future, it's usually 12 months, the guillotine will come down and it won't be possible. So there is an urgency to looking at whether we can do it and how and when.
Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable with the way this is going. I can see the headlines in the Daily Mail or similar papers where it says Horsham Council spend, and it's irresponsible. And I think we've still got to be prudent what we're doing. And we don't know where we're going, where we're heading in this devolution setup as yet. And I don't want to ruin the future by taking away everything which future councils may need.
I think there's a basic misunderstanding of the points I'm trying to get across. The points I'm trying to get across is we have hitherto been limited by resource in capital spending. The mindset is we don't have the manpower to do it. What I'm saying is we should look at addressing that issue, and as the Director of Resource says, if it makes sense, then we should procure extra resource to address the problem and increase the capital spend. I'm not saying use all the money and spend it. What I'm saying is don't be constrained by present thinking and think outside of the box, even though I hate that sort of metaphor. Absolutely loathe that sort of metaphor. But that's the message I'm trying to get across.
Okay, can I? Okay, I was getting a different picture from Councillor Circus, where it was talking about more legacy, making a legacy for us, and I think there's a danger we could go the wrong way there. But I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Clark. I, in some way, agree with your approach.
Yeah, if the message was the wrong one, I apologise. I was just trying to get that point across. Any other questions, Councillor Bainham?
If I can just come back on some of those things. Certainly, I very much take what you said on board, Councillor Clark. This is very much at the forefront of our thinking at the moment in Cabinet. And the comments that Councillor Circus made, we have already started discussing how we can do this. There are a number of predicates that were required. So, for example, Horsham Town, as you know, is unparished, doesn't have a town council. It's been many of my colleagues and myself's view that a town council is fully appropriate for Horsham, and it becomes even more so appropriate now because there's no way we could transfer assets to the 3 neighbourhood councils. They're not legally established to do that. So we would, if we wanted to do that, we would have to do that. But it's not just the potential town council. It's also the capacity of the parishes to take on these sorts of things. I mean, and some are in better positions than others. So there could be, and we're looking at the prospect of Do we want a parish reorganisation to create more substantial parish bodies that have a certain level of scale that can handle such things? And there may be difficulties, as Dom has already said, about legalities of transferring things, but it has been done in the past. And where there's a will, I think there's a way. And certainly that's one of the areas that we are actively looking at the time. In terms of beefing up the capital project, well, we have beefed it up considerably this year from what it's been in previous years. And it's quite ambitious, but as Dom said, we can always add further capital items. There are some quite big ones. You'll be discussing later the Capitol Theatre. There's quite a lot of money involved in that one, for example. And there may be there are other things we can do. I mean, in terms of ensuring the legacy, if that's the best term to use for it. We're investigating the concept of a trust for Horsham Park. That'll be coming to a discussion in due course. Because it's fairly clear to me that once you have a unitary, most or if not all of the non-statutory services are all going to get binned.
Yeah.
And we're not here as councillors to you put it in perfect words. Yeah, certainly not. And not just our town, I'm talking about our wider district. Yeah. Because we're councillors not because it's just Horsham District Council, but we all live here and we all care about it, and that's our motivation. Whichever political colour you are, I mean that's a common feature, isn't it? And we don't want all our reserves to disappear into a black hole of whatever spending or underfunding is happening elsewhere. So we take that really seriously. I take your comments on board, Chair, and we will be discussing that further as we already are in Cabinet.
Thank you. The last one of the comments Councillor Bainham made about the parish councils, it may have escaped you, but the next topic that we're going on to, which is the annual plan, the point he was referring to is you can find on page 76 in the second line where they talk about the community governance review, and that's what he was referring to, in case members of the committee hadn't picked up on it. Thank you, Councillor Bainham. Spent a lot of time on this subject, but it is an important topic. I think we'll move on now to the annual plan. I'll hand over to Councillor Franklin, and you supporting, and Sam Wilson will support. Sorry, I actually made a note here. Well, I thought you might leave after Tony had finished, to be honest, but if you want to go, that's fine. But it's up to you. I'm easy. I'll hand over to Councillor Franklin, supported by Sam Wilson. And if there's any questions on it, I'm sure that Councillor Franklin will answer them, or any tricky ones. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is concerning the finalisation, really, and the publication of the annual plan 25-26. And this, and the background here is that we have a council plan, 23-27 council plan, under which this sits, and indeed under which previous annual plan sat. Just to remind us all, there are 4 themes of our strategy under which we plan these activities: supporting people, communities, inspiring greener futures, building a thriving local economy, and always listening, learning, and improving. So in Appendix A, I think in the pack, we have the annual plan, and you'll see it's quite ambitious. We have 35 initiatives and projects itemised in there. And there are sort of 3 types, really. There are those that are ongoing. We've already started them, but they're not yet finished, and we'll carry on. There are some that we have previously identified, but we had yet to start. And then there are some which are actually completely new in this year's plan. I think it's probably, we've referred to already, the devolution and the reorganisation of local government is impact and may impact many things going forward, and that there undoubtedly will be activities, projects within this annual plan that may take on greater, may need to be maybe accelerated, and others which will become less important or even irrelevant, depending on how the progress of devolution and local government reorganisation takes place. And this is, of course, not an annual plan that we put on the shelf for the next year and not change it or adjust it. It is live. We can make changes to this as we go along, and expect we will do that. I haven't done any sort of review of it in the light of reorganisation because I think it's just a bit premature, but that is something that we're of course open to. Now, one of the key aspects of this, or going along with this, is how do we keep a track on how we're doing? If you like, what are our key performance indicators, and how do we track them, and what do we use them for? So in the Appendix 2, I think, or it might be Appendix B, Appendix 2, thank you, Chair, there is a list of KPIs. Now, we still need to do work on this, actually. Now, Councillor Ellis-Brown and myself have done a reasonable amount of work along with the officer, thank you very much, and others have been made aware of what's happening here. But I think there's still work to do to bring this down from, well, we started out with about 34 KPIs, which is an unmanageable number. We're down to about 24, which I think is still unmanageable. And I've done a fairly deep or hard review of it in the last few days, and I think there's still some way to go on these. I think some of them in there, honestly, I don't think are KPIs still. We've taken up a number already. And some of them refer to, if you like, day-to-day operational performance of individual, maybe departments or groups within the council, and others relate more to how do we want the district to be? What is a measure of success for Horsham district in the future? Perhaps just give an example of our thinking here. So, for example, in building a thriving local economy, we have a key KPI, which is percentage of invoices paid on time. Now, that's a good thing to do because it supports local businesses who are billing us, but it isn't necessarily going to drive a thriving local economy in the way that we envisage. I think there might be a better or other KPIs, such as the number of new business startups in the year, or the number of people employed in Horsham district, or a figure for Horsham district GDP, if that sort of thing is available. So that's the sort of thinking that we're trying to put in, and myself, Councillor Ellis-Brown, and others maybe in the next few weeks will be working to get these in place in time for the approval of this in this coming council year. Right. I think that's my introduction. If there are any questions or comments or
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Franklin.
construction
The only
comments.
comment I would make about percentage of invoices paid on time, it depends on what your payment terms are initially anyway. So that's a whole different debate, isn't it? Any questions for Councillor Franklin? Sorry, Councillor Livingston?
Just would like to ask a few questions in reference to the actual plan. Number 5, improve vulnerable residents' access to benefits. You've got underneath that there are no actions under this theme. Surely there must be some sort of actions, even possibly like publicising what's available. And just to put no action seems a bit negative.
Yes, I understand the point. I expect it may be that there's no additional change in action in this year versus last year. I expect that might be it. Maybe, is that, yeah, I'm getting nods over there. Yeah. yeah, we might reword that. Yeah, I could take that point. Yeah.
Next one is number 7, hold a safety event aimed at young people. We have a big district, why only one? And is it going to be limited to a certain number of young people?
It might be symptomatic of a certain Horsham-centric point of view instead of thinking of the district as a whole, I would suggest, Dennis.
Couldn't possibly comment, but yeah, I think it's a good question. I think that's something we could look at.
Councillor Paul Anderson may have an input.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. On the back of that, that's following some of the incidents we had in Horsham Park last autumn. We put something in about a safety event. I think we're still in discussions with the Cabinet member about what that might look like. It might look like numerous events at a school level. It may be at a town or a village level. It's absolutely not at a Horsham town level. We're very conscious of schools in Billingshurst and Stenning and elsewhere.
Yeah, perhaps it
Does
could
that
be
help,
reworded.
Councillor Livingston?
Yeah, can I?
Does that help?
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Okay, do you want to continue?
Yeah, perhaps that could be reworded again. The next one is inspiring green futures. Point 2, it says remove gas boilers from Park House, Horsham. Then it goes remove gas boilers from Park Street accommodation, Horsham. Hopefully we're going to replace them with something.
Jumpers. Jumpers then.
Yeah, okay. I'm coming to the end of my list. Bear with me, lost myself now. Right, the next one is under the heading Building a Thriving Local Economy. Campaign for improvements in public transport. You've put forward Billingshurst and Southwater and not considered any sort of rural areas where public transport should be considered for improvement. And I would like you to consider that possibility, please. And then moving on to always listening, learning and improving, which I hope we're doing now. Number 5, ensure a district-wide balance of focus between rural and urban. And you've got ensure 2 of the parish area meetings have a rural focus in the southern parts of the district. There are rural locations in the north of the district which you really need to consider, including Nuthurst and Lower Beeding and Warnham, another area. And also, this is number 6, support residents in getting a locally responsive service from the County Council's highway service on traffic and parking issues. And you've got, again, there are no actions under this theme. Perhaps we should be able to somehow make it clear who we can ask for help, or reword that one.
Which number?
Oh, sorry, number 6, under the always listening. Yeah, on page 76, yeah, great. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Quick response. Just, yeah, thanks for the comments. I suggest, I don't know, Sam, if we want to meet and we can adjust some of these things, and Paul, and they're all worthy of looking at, I think. Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Councillor Franklin? Or comments about the KPIs? Oh well, I'll have a go then. I note that the KPIs on planning, which is right at the end, I mean, basically those are national KPIs, they may change, but we already do those, they exist, I see them regularly on a monthly basis, most of them, so I think that's fine. 2 comments or points which I did raise. Appendix A, page 71, item 3, the first bullet point refers to Duke Square. There's absolutely no mention at all of the London Road car park redevelopment, which is really quite important and would provide quite a lot of affordable housing for residents of the town and the district, but there's no mention of it. It's a really important project. Why is it not mentioned at all? Sorry, Paul.
we don't have a scheme for London Road car park as yet, so we're going to be working. We're working during this calendar year to develop a scheme which we intend to bring to members towards the end of the calendar year for consideration.
Like I'm a bit nervous about these things in view of our earlier conversation earlier on. And the running track is the other one that springs to mind, of course, which is the other one that is also high on the agenda for possibly providing housing. So thank you for that. Referring to inspiring greener futures. Essentially, there's no mention in here of the EV charge points or the collaboration with West Sussex County Council to get more EV charge points into the district. Why is it not mentioned? And if it isn't, maybe we can find out and mention it. Sorry.
I think essentially, Chairman, that's business as usual. So that's ongoing work that we're delivering rather than a new initiative as such.
If my understanding was the EV charge point program from county, maybe it's moved on since then. They were in what I would call the experimental stage of putting in EV charge points in a number of different localities to see if it would work or not work. These are my words, not official words. And what you're saying is it's moved on from there, has it? And if it has, I'm not aware of it, and I think councillors aren't aware of it.
I think we'll pick up with Councillor Frankland and Sam and Jack.
Thank you. It's just that EV charge points appeared in Pulborough in an area where people are thinking, why the hell did you put them there? And I understand it was an experiment to see whether it would work in that context, choosing that as an example of being able to be rolled out across the county as a whole is why they did it. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Bateman.
It's just really an observation and just request really for a little tweak. And it's where we're saying that we're always listening, always learning and always improving. We've obviously done quite a lot of work this time with the Task and Finish on speaking to young people, but at no point in here do we actually mention getting feedback from young people on our services to make sure that we are improving and delivering for them. So it's just trying to see, can we get the children's voice as well as the adult voice somehow? Thank you.
So, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
We did consider the Task and Finish group, but the words from the outcome of the Task and Finish group has been removed from that. It's under communities, number 9, improving access to sport, which was the Task and Finish group you were working on. Just draw up an action plan to improve access to outside sport for women and girls.
I think children.
Oh,
It's not just about
about girls. Okay.
It's not just sport, it's about being able to relax, socialise, play.
Okay.
It's far wider than
Okay.
sport.
So I was just trying to find it in the plan here. Any other questions or points on item 6 of the agenda? No? I'd like to thank Tony Frankland for coming and talking to us, and I know Jacqueline came along as well, but hasn't said much, but thank you for coming anyway. If the cabinet members would like to go, please by all means go, or you're welcome to stay, as the case may be. I'd like to thank you both for coming anyway, and doing us a courtesy of coming.
Thank you, Chair. I might just stay for the next item and then leave.
You're free to come and go as you wish. Thank you, Mark, for coming. Item 7, the Capital Theatre Project. Will now receive a report from the Director of Communities, Paul Anderson, on the Capital Theatre and the state of the project. And he's backed up, or maybe Nick might be doing the presentation. He's backed up by Nick Jenkins as well.
Sorry, I'll start again. Sorry, Claire. Let's bring it forward. I haven't got the strongest voice in the world for sure. What I'm going to do is give you a quick recap on how we got to where we are with the capital, but talk you through briefly the proposals contained within the report. So if you remember, back in February, Council approved a budget of £10.7 million based on the feasibility work that was carried out in 22-23. And between March and October of last year, we progressed the project under what's called a REBA stage framework, and we completed REBA's stages 1, 2 and 3 in preparation for closure and refurbishment, which was to be this April. Across these stages, cost plans were checked and assessed, and at the end of each stage, a revised cost plan was generated. REBA stage 1 and 2 identified no significant changes. However, towards this end of REBA stage 3, our main contractor, Wilmot Dixon Interiors, indicated increase to 13.3 million, which is obviously in excess of what we had budgeted for. A decision was made to pause the project to see if costs could be de-scoped. However, it was decided that this was not possible, and the project and the contracts were subsequently terminated. This entered into a 13-week pause period where we needed to assess what we were going to do with those contractors or not. So essentially the original project has been terminated. However, work to the capital is urgent and is needed. I trust that you've all been in there, I'm sure you have. Seating is pretty appalling. Some of the furnishings, the carpet, it needs some work on it basically to keep it operational and functioning. The report that we've put together details a 2-year phased approach to this work, because it's only fair that you have it in its entirety. However, we're looking for costs associated to phase 1 only, not phase 2 at the moment. Also to remind you that the original project was looking for a significant closure period. It was to be between April 25 through to perhaps November 26. That meant that we have a gap in our programming for this year. The capital generally programs about a year in advance. So when we terminated the project in October, it meant that we didn't really have the ability to program anything through from April through to the autumn with any confidence or quality. So we essentially have dead time in the theatre. We need to make use of that time. So it's quite pressing. So if we take that as a starting point, the first focus that we need to do is to complete some of the surveys that weren't done as REBA stage 4, because we obviously terminated after REBA stage 3. There are a number of surveys we need to still complete to understand that building. So they need to happen straight away. Once those are done, we will enter phase 1, and we're looking for that to start in April, but it may be May depending on how the surveys go. And to give you a really brief overview of what that phase 1 will look like, it's going to be refurbing the auditorium, which means taking out the seats and replacing them. It's painting, changing the carpets, looking at the house lights and things like that. We'll be doing similar with the cinemas, but also putting additional equipment, updating the equipment in there. We'll be refurbing and decorating all the public spaces. We'll be improving the bar area and the box office, refurbing and improving the toilets in terms of capacity and quality, installing a changing places facility to improve accessibility, repairing and improving the roof, and replacing and upgrading end-of-life equipment like projectors, so operationally we're okay. Crucially, during phase 1, we'll be also carrying out a comprehensive survey and validation of the MEP, which is the mechanical, electrical and plant or plumbing, so we can better understand the air source heat pumps or the aspiration to have them, how they will operate in the venue, the associated running costs, and what upgrades need to be made to the venue to accommodate them. So we will be doing that bit in phase 1. Based on the information gleaned as part of those surveys, the expectation is that we will come back to Cabinet and Council in October, requesting further finances to look at those changes that we need to do. It's likely that phase 2 will concentrate on the MEP upgrade, so that will include things like ducting, heating coils, some cabling, emitters and things like that. There's a need to upgrade the power supply that goes in it. We're currently right up to the limit for running that venue. The addition of air source heat pumps will probably trip us over that, so we need to build in additional capacity. We'll also replace the studio roof where the plant will sit. It also needs strengthening as they go on there. And it will be the installation of the air source heat pumps if that's what we decide to do. We currently have a contractor lined up ready to do the surveys, which is Wilmot Dixon, and some people may have some questions about that. The expectation is that Wilmot Dixon will also complete the work as well. I'll leave it there, but I will take the opportunity to answer one question that Councillor Jeffrey has put in advance around the subsidy. In the original project, we were looking to reduce the subsidy of the revenue of the Capitol Theatre. In this report, it doesn't highlight that. And the reality is it was linked to the increasing capacity of seating within the auditorium. We currently have 411 seats, which is a bit of an odd figure for an auditorium. We were looking to increase that to 480. That would have reduced the subsidy. The question is that we now won't do that, but equally if we're installing air source heat pumps, although we won't be reliant on gas, we will be reliant on electricity. The thought is that the air source heat pumps will need to be run for longer than gas boilers, and so the cost of electricity is fairly high and we will be consuming more. So the subsidy isn't achievable. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions? Councillor Vickers?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Nick, for that very full description. I was chairman of the Leisure Services Committee when we did the refurbishment in 2003. So I'm partly responsible for the carpets and the seats that were chosen. Yeah. I totally agree that those things need replacing. I agree the toilets need doing. I agree all those things. We had that glass box put on the front without much consideration to how that would be heated or kept cool in summer and winter. So I'm totally supportive of this. Based on what we said earlier about the review of local government, could we justify spending the increased amount and doing everything? That's just a question.
Probably not for me to answer.
I'm sure the Section 151 officer would have a view, but my comment would be this. If you wanted to deliver the project as originally envisaged 12 months ago, we do nothing this year, because it means that we can't do the works to the theatre because we can't increase. So I think we should progress with the project as recommended. If the council wanted to do additional works, if it wanted to review the glass box, it potentially could do that in 26, 27. But that's not something that we're currently recommending.
I totally accept that, Chairman. And closing the capital for any longer than is proposed would be most unpopular at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, I'm very pleased it's going to be open for the next Christmas pantomime, which we do enjoy. I was surprised that you're still contracting, with Wilmot Dixon. They were the contractor, I believe, who upped the price. Was there any issues with going with them?
When the project was paused, we had a series of meetings with all the contractors. Now, our initial thoughts were that Wilmot Dixon had perhaps increased the costs unfairly and unreasonably. In those meetings with them, we've changed our view. Actually, I think the costs were fair and reasonable, and they've shown a willingness to proceed with this project, which we think has come from a place of good intention. And working with them over the last 10 weeks, I think, has built on that. I think you would agree, Paul, on that. So certainly, yes, so certainly at the beginning when the project was terminated, I think me and Paul were pretty cross actually, and we did think that that was the contractor that was to blame. We have done a U-turn. I'm happy to say that, and we're content with them as a contractor.
Okay, and you've not considered going towards any other contractor? Would it be more? It would probably be wasting more time, I suspect.
Yeah, so we appointed Wilmot Dixon under the SCAPE framework, so they're still within that. Could we go back out to procurement? Yeah, but we won't hit our deadlines.
Thank you.
Councillor Circus?
I mean, when we've had these discussions about legacy, I mean, the Capitol Theatre's been one of the items that's been put into the forefront of discussions. I mean, it may be that we end up, for want of a better expression, handing it over to the new unitary authority. But if we do that, we want to give the new authority the least possible excuse to bin the theatre.
Mm.
And if there are major works still to be done, costing serious money, they would have, apart from the support we give year by year, there would also be a major capital expenditure that would be needed, that we have left, which would give them a further excuse to close the theatre. And therefore, whether we can find a way of transferring it to another authority, or whether it will go to the unitary authority, its survival as a Horsham asset must depend, in either case, to a large extent, on our ability to defray now the major costs involved, capital costs involved, and therefore I would fully support what Councillor Vickers said earlier.
Thank you, John.
Can I add something there, please?
Of course.
I take the point about the capital expenditure, but actually for me, the ongoing revenue subsidy is the key element that I think potentially we are missing an area here where we could make it more attractive for whatever organisation takes over the running of it. And obviously the lower the amount of subsidy, and ideally you'd want a venue that turns a profit, but you know, it's unlikely to do that. But the smaller the subsidy, the more attractive it is actually to run. The one good thing from the previous scheme was obviously the increase in capacity and the impact that had generating more income that would reduce that subsidy. And we need to be mindful here, and I expressed my view as a Section 151 officer in the addendum that was sent around, is that we're potentially going to spend £10.2 million here and have no impact on the subsidy whatsoever. So my, reluctance to support this, and I would, reduce the amount of expenditure that we're spending here, is because we are not affecting the subsidy level in there.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? No? Touching on what the Director of Resources said, this might be a bit detailed, but the thing that sprang to my mind was this subsidy that we're ongoing. And then I hear that basically by putting in these air source pumps, we are potentially going to increase the costs of running the place for what? So for me, the question is, do we know what the cost changes are going to be in terms of what we're running now with what we would be running on an all-electric air source, etc., or an alternative electric solution, if that is viable, obviously, technically to do. And I don't know, do we have a feeling for those numbers?
This is exactly what we need to do as part of this year. We need to delve into that. Absolutely right. And we totally agree. We don't understand fully what that is, but we need to do that bit now, and hence that's why we would bring it back to council in October with those figures.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add on to the conversation around the subsidy, it's probably more of a question aimed at Dominic really, and partly at Nick as well. So obviously we have neighbours who have also got theatres. I'm unsure if the setup is similar or not. I don't know. I imagine it may be. But have we looked at the levels of subsidy that they offer? Have we done any comparison work? Have we seen if they've implemented any strategies or any work to potentially reduce theirs? Because I'm sure as local government reorganisation comes in, everyone's going to be thinking the same thing. So my thinking behind it is, would it not be a good idea to work with neighbouring authorities who have similar theatres, similar issues that we will do, to see if we can learn from one another on reducing these things and making them as attractive as possible in order to preserve them? Thank you.
If I can come in there, so no, I haven't done that piece of work, but if we look at theatres that are available within West Sussex or with the Horsham district and neighbouring districts, you have the Horth, which is an 800-seat theatre, which primarily focuses on things like tribute acts and stuff. Do they have a subsidy? Don't know. I can find that out. They do. Obviously, the major player within West Sussex is the Chichester Festival Theatre. It's got global recognition. It receives about £11 million from Arts Council per annum. It's on a different level altogether. You're then looking at sort of Worthing and Bognor that have smaller theatres or halls. The capital is fairly unique in terms of its size and offer. Guildford, in Surrey. So it is quite unusual. And so the comparison is actually quite difficult to make.
I think before I invite Councillor Bateman to come in, I think the other thing to look at is things like the variable costs of the variable income. So basically things like the cost of popcorn, like the cost of drinks. So not, if we get the pricing wrong, and by wrong I mean considerably cheaper than the alternative, we're giving away money. So that's something else I have no doubt that officers will be looking at. Councillor Bateman.
I'm just trying to clarify my understanding really, because I feel like I'm getting the impression that was throwing good money after bad, because it's not doing anything to improve the subsidy, it's not doing anything to increase revenues. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's about the value of the money that you're spending. So absolutely, some things are absolutely in need of replacement, aren't they? So if you sat in those chairs in the auditorium, they are falling apart. They are at the end of their life. They're probably beyond the end of their life, albeit we only receive a few complaints about it, but actually they need replacing, don't they? There are other areas that as an accountant I can sit here and think, is that value for money? Changing the layout of the bath, for example, it's a nice to have maybe it will generate a little bit more income, but does it give a financial return? So you could pick your way through all those things, and if you're being an accountant, remove them from the list quite easily without any sentiment or consideration of anything else. And that is my role, to challenge people to do so. It needs some investment, of course it does. It needs regular investment, it needs maintenance all the time, and every 20 or so years it does need a proper refurb. It's how deeply you go for that refurb, and whether you just want to be able to do enough to make it good enough, or do you want it all singing, all dancing, if you'll excuse the pun.
Please, Nick, go ahead.
I don't disagree with Dom, which you might be surprised to hear, but I think I need a counterpoint in there. We did a survey in the summer, which got 1,200 responses from the residents, which is a big response for any survey that we do. Very clearly, the response was that they value the capital, but the areas that they were focused on was the seating, no surprises, but the comfort and the customer experience. And so the look and feel of it in its entirety is important for that. Queues at toilets, the look of the toilets, the worn out carpets. If we do the bare minimum, and there is a rationale certainly to do that, will you see a fall away of those people coming to the capital because it doesn't offer them that which they put very highly in the survey? Possibly. Could you value engineer it year on year where you do a bit here and there to keep it going? You could do that as well, but then you're slightly in danger of having little bits of closures here and there. It's not open when you want it. So there is a counterpoint to that as well, I think.
Thank you, Nick. I think points well made. Any other comments? Councillor Lennon-Ellis-Brown?
Yeah, I would support Nick. We don't want to be losing money, but we need to consider other aspects here. What's the social benefit? And what is it that the people in our community want? So is it a quality facility? Is it what they want? And does it add social benefit to our community? So that's the aspects we consider. It's not just about, we must make money. It's about we shouldn't lose significant sums or lose money, but it's something that we should do that offers social benefit to our communities, and that it's something that they want. And it sounds like what I've heard you say, Nick, that based on the survey, there are things that we need to do. Plus, we ought to be mindful, well, this year, if we do it, let's say it's going to cost 10 point, whatever, next year or 2 years, 10.2 million. Leave it for another 5 or 6 years, it could be 16 million. So I think we need to do those piecemeal aspects now that continually improve over a given time and leaves a legacy for our community for the future. And the arts has been absolutely decimated in this country. I think in Berlin, they spend 90% more in Berlin than we do in the whole of the country on the arts. And I think we as a community should be mindful of that and do more for the arts and utilise that, get that capital, build the theatre to a position where we can encourage more people to visit, so the amount of subsidy is reduced significantly, and get it to a status where we're going to get bigger and better things coming because it's a bigger and better venue.
And again, can I just say I don't necessarily disagree with that, but it's a shame, isn't it, that the previous version had more seating in there, re-raking that seating, getting that more income in there to drive down that subsidy. And this version here, where we're still spending £10.2 million, doesn't have that and won't have any impact on the subsidy. So again, I point back to, is it value for money to spend all that £10.2 million and it still doesn't have an impact on the subsidy?
Can I just ask what the subsidy would be year on year?
Approximately £375,000.
Okay, so divided by the number of people that live in our community, and what's that per head?
Well, it's still £375,000.
Yes, but...
And my point here is that the £10.2 million, the cost of capital of that £10.2 million is probably going to double that subsidy. So around £400,000.
Any other questions or comments on the Capital Theatre project? I'd like to thank you, Nick, Paul, and officers for taking us through that. Thank you, Tony. Next item on the agenda is the Highwood Community Venue. We're going to receive a report from Nick again. Yep, okay, from Nick Jenkins and Liz Williams on property with the status of the Highwood Community / function room. It's a project that's been around for quite some time. I thought it was sort of motoring ahead, and then I found that in fact it's stalled and has been resurrected, if I can put it that way. So Nick and Liz will take us through where we are on the issue, and I will ask them to come back, giving them a heads up now. I'll ask them to come back and report when they get to the end of their process of trying to see where they're going. But in the meantime, I'll hand over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chairman. You stole a bit of my thunder. That introduction was bang on what I was going to say. No, it's absolutely fine. It gives me a bit of confidence that I'm in the right area. As Highwood, absolutely, it's been around for a very long time in terms of an aspiration. It did get to Cabinet in 22 and was approved, and it has drifted since then. I think that's fair. resurrected is a good analogy for this. It's come back onto mine and Liz's sort of table to look at. So if we look at the Highwood development, it's got a number of things that have now been associated to that. It's got a Mooga that's been installed. It's got a play area, and it's got two very good quality junior sized football pitches. They are there ready to go, essentially. But to make them used to their fullest, we need to have some sort of facility there to service that, and also meet the aspiration that there was a community facility of some type within that development. The note that we circulated is suggesting that we need to do some further consultation, not about what we put in there necessarily, but what the use would be within that development. So the note there really lays out the timescales associated to that fairly brief and punchy consultation that we're proposing to do. Me and Liz and a couple of Liz's new officers, very, very keen officers, are going to take that forward at pace. So during February we will shape it. The proposal is that we will engage with the community through March and into April, Liz, so I'm looking at you. And
March mainly. Yeah.
March mainly, yeah. And then we will look to be bringing back those results in May, really. So that's really the update. Liz, and if you want to add anything, because you're maybe a bit more involved in the detail on this than me.
Yeah, so the facility that we're proposing is, I suppose, in two parts. And I think the given is that it will need toilets and changing rooms to service the football pitches. So we're really just talking about what the hall would, what would be used for, so we can understand what kind of exact parameters we need for within that hall, whether it needs to be really tall for kind of basketball or whether it needs to be wider so we get enough people doing yoga or whatever the case may be. So and what that community really wants. So when we come back in May to Cabinet, we would have fleshed out that from the community, and we would have also got some pricing and designs to come back to Cabinet with.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this, members? Councillor Livingstone?
Yeah, I notice you can arrange visits to other community venues in the district. In my ward, I've got 3 village halls, which are not owned by the parish council. They're owned by their own trusts, one of which I was chair of for 17 years. And I'd welcome you to come and talk to those people. So that's Copsale Hall, Village Hall, Manningsea Village Hall, and the Lower Beeding Village Hall. I'm sure they would welcome you.
Thank you. Any other points or comments? Dom?
Can I make one as well? So you won't be surprised to hear that obviously there are 2 different choices here, aren't there? One's to put a big hall on it, and one's just the changing room facilities. And of course, my view as when we're spending money like this is to make sure that we are having value for money in that. And obviously, the smaller the venue, the cheaper it is, the lower it costs to build and to run, and less concrete you're pumping into it, etc. And of course, there are obviously 3 examples there from Councillor Livingstone there. But of course, there are 24 existing halls within the town centre already, aren't there? Not necessarily all run by us, but there are 3,905 spaces at those venues in the Horsham town. And of course, we've also got to bear in mind that we would be potentially passing this across to whatever town council there to run, no doubt at a cost, because lots of these buildings require subsidy. So we also need to be mindful, therefore, of what we put on there, regardless, of the feedback, etc., and what the community wants, etc. But if that community does actually come back and say, do you know what, we probably don't need a hall because there are 24 already in Horsham, then perhaps we shouldn't, put a legacy building up there for the future that will cost in the future an ongoing revenue cost again. So.
Any other points or comments? I think I'll make a point. One of the main points behind Highwood, because I was working on it at the time as a cabinet member, was it was pushed in the context of putting a proper hall, etc., part of it was funded by a baby and toddler group type thing, nursery, whatever. And the other raison d'etre for doing it was the fact that the drill hall was going to be redeveloped and we were going to get rid of it. The drill hall will continue, I believe. I haven't heard any different, that the people who are taking it on have backed out and have dropped it. Okay, it's confirmed by the Director of Communications agreeing. So I do know that consultation did take place. It was quite disappointing. It was inconclusive and it was sparse. I note that in item 3, the comment in paragraph 3.6, at the end of the day, they might have a clear preference for what they want, but at the end of the day, we need to consider what people want, and more to the point, what's practical. I think with those words, I hope that it goes well, and I look forward to you guys coming back and reporting to us at an appropriate time. No other comments from anybody? Please.
Just to what you said, also to comment on what Dom said, I think, again, absolutely fair, Dom. You know, if we look at the immediate area to Highwood, we have Blackbridge Lane, which Liz is obviously involved with, which was, you know, refurbished. Yeah. You know, I think part of the consultation with Highwood has to be very open and fair with them, to remind them that I think Blackbridge Lane only runs at 27% capacity, isn't it? Yes. So there is availability down the road. So we need to be mindful of that, and I think it will be reflected in the consultation, Dom, because, you know, should we be putting a venue up which isn't going to be used? I think we need to ask that.
Thank you, Nick. No comments? I think, Nick, Liz, if you want to stay, you're welcome, and Paul, but if you want to go, we perfectly understand. But thank you all three for coming. So, thank you for coming. Next item on the agenda is item 9, which is a report on Task and Finish Group, which is to do with the lease contracts, basically, that we set up some time ago. It was chaired by Belinda, but unfortunately Belinda has an engagement today that she couldn't get out of. And Alex has very kindly been pushed, coerced, or bullied into presenting to the committee. I'd like to thank the working group and especially the officers who supported for all the time and the effort invested in doing the work. I think possibly we've ended up in a slightly different place than I'd intended or thought, but on the other hand, having read the report fully, I think it's a worthwhile piece of work and useful to the council. So I hand over to you, Councillor Jeffrey, to take us through it, and then we'll have questions and whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as many of you will know, this Task and Finish Group first met in March of last year. The report that we're going to read out gives a summary of the work of the Task and Finish Group and includes observations and recommendations from the meetings. We are grateful, I'll reiterate the Chair's comments, to the Head of Property and Facilities, Liz Williams, and Leisure and Culture and Housing and Communities for all the work provided, all the work done and the information provided, and has assisted greatly with this. So thank you very much for all that work over the last year on that. Discussions have also taken place with the Director of Resources, Director of Communities and the Director of Place. The Task and Finish Group set out to review lease contracts and evaluate contracts in terms of cost effectiveness, profit and the benefit of assets to the council and to the community. It was agreed that members were content with the process of leases in relation to the investment portfolio. However, there were some concerns in relation to lease agreements for community properties, and it was considered that a more formal framework should be established. It was proposed that a building classification register to be established, setting out full details of the property, lease arrangements and any justification for why the property may be leased at under the market value, for example, as a building condition or community value, An example of how this should be set out is in Appendix A of the report, and this will ensure that officers have consistency with record keeping moving forward. It was recognised that some organisations who lease properties from HDC also provide key services to residents in the district. Whilst these leases have financial value to the council, there is also an element of community value, and it was recognised that the calculation of this had not been formally documented. The group considered a number of social value definitions and looked at some examples from other councils where formal framework had been adopted to quantify social value for community leases. You will see in the report in Appendix B shows the example of Newham which was used as a starting point. The group also considered the national Tom's guidance, which is detailed in Appendix C. With assistance from officers the group has proposed a framework document which is set out in Appendix D. This sets out the definition of social value for Horsham District Council, and it provides a way to measure and report social value against the current council plan priorities. And it also provides a consistent approach and will allow organisations to see what Horsham District Council is looking for in terms of their role in providing community and social value. This will apply to charities, community interest companies, groups and cooperatives where the profits are used for social aims. Commercial organisations are not eligible. Pages 4 to 8 of Appendix D set out the application and scoring process to be considered and how any financial discounts will be calculated. The framework document should be consulted at the start of lease negotiations and as review points to ensure fair rent is being obtained and that organisations are still providing the services to residents outlined at the start of the lease. It was also considered by the group that the delegation protocols in relation to community leases should be more clearly documented and reviewed as part of the current review of the Constitution. It was also accepted that the scoring matrix in Appendix D may require a trial period and authority should be delegated to the Director of Place to make minor amendments should and when they be required. The Task and Finish Group's recommendations are that the findings of the review are noted and that the report is submitted to the Monitoring Officer for consideration by Cabinet, and it's recommended that the social and community value lease discount policy Appendix D is adopted and establish what, if any, discount local organisations should receive when leasing a community property. Second point, the delegation in the Council's Constitution is reviewed as part of the current constitutional review to consider the scheme of delegations for Director of Resources and Director of Place. And thirdly, that the authority be delegated to the Director of Place to make minor amendments to the scoring matrix if required, following a trial period of up to 12 months. And also recommended that the chairman of the committee invite the head of service who contributed to the review to report to a future meeting of the committee to provide an update in relation to any progress. That's all I've got for you for now, Chairman. If there's any questions, we'll try and field them as best we can.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions for Alex on the report from the Task and Finish Group? No comments at all? No questions? Well, as I said earlier on, I wanted to thank the officers, Liz and other officers, plus the members of the group for all the work that they've done. And as I said, I think it's a very worthwhile and useful piece. I mean, I must confess, I'd never heard of social value before. I actually did learn a lot of new stuff, even though I didn't understand some of it, but it's an interesting concept.
Every day's a school day, Chairman.
Thank you, especially, yeah, I would agree. I think the other point is to note that for Democratic Services, the comment about coming back later on, I hope you made a note. What's not clear to me though is maybe officers can advise, it says to submit this report to the monitoring officer, that's clear, for consideration by the Cabinet. I'm not quite sure when that happens and who's going to do it. Presumably I do it, or does Alex and I do it? And Alex would come to that meeting as well. Is it the next Cabinet meeting or is it later? I mean, I don't have a feel for those.
I confess I'm not entirely sure on that, but I will certainly make inquiries.
Thank you. I've been trying to look on the calendar. I can't find out so how it works. So, okay. But thank you for that, Alex.
Well, I mean, it won't be on the forward plan yet because obviously you are now approving that as a action here, if you like.
So it won't be at the next Cabinet meeting?
So probably won't be at the one in 2 weeks' time. It's more likely to be at the March one should Cabinet agree that they want to put in a social community value lease discount policy.
Thanks for your guidance. Item 10, update on task and finish groups. I basically briefly touched on the progress of the BESS working group. Thanks, Liz. Good night. So if there's any questions for Councillor Leonard, for Len, we'll take them now. Otherwise, we'd also want an update from Sam Bateman on her task and finish group. So shall we start with Sam?
Yeah, so we have our final, hopefully, meeting of the Task and Finish group in early February. I'm hopeful at that point we'll then be in a position to be able to then submit our final report, but I'd like to hold off saying that is a firm, definite that will be in. I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver if that's okay. But the ambition is to bring that final report to March. We haven't been able to meet with the planning team, obviously, because they've been tied up with the inspector. But that has been the major hold-up, and at the moment I'm still of the thinking that we cannot yet approach them for their final feelings. Anyway, yeah, but our final meeting hopefully is in early February, and with a good wind we'll be able to bring that report to you for March.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Lynn Ellis-Brown, do you want to make any comments about BESS, apart from the ones that I made earlier on?
No, I think we've got another meeting on the 11th of February to go through the recommendations. We had a presentation this week from West Sussex Fire and Rescue Services, which was quite interesting actually. I learned quite a lot from that. Don't leave your mobile phone charging unless you're in the house. But we are meeting again in February to come up with the recommendations and the next steps from that. Putting forward a report, preparing a report to submit.
Thank you. Any questions for Len? Shall we move on? No. Item 11. It's a work programme. The work programme is denoting by members of the committee. If anybody on the committee has got an item that you wish to add at this point in time, it would be helpful if you tell me or tell Democratic Services and myself, preferably by email. The work, did you update the work programme with that last bit or not?
It's in the draft for the next year's year.
Okay, so there is an item in here which was picked up if you read your papers to do with the plans, which was an action on overview and scrutiny to look at. So that will be added to the work plan. If you have any ideas for task and finish, always welcome any ideas and topics to look at. Councillor Circus.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't help feeling that we ought to be doing something in the way of scrutiny in relation to what looks like the unfolding of local government reorganisation. The only problem is I can't actually think what form that scrutiny would take. I mean, we need to be reasonably certain in our own minds that this is actually going ahead. And I had a long talk with the leader, and the leader's view, which seems eminently sensible, is because we should get it soon, is a reaction from the Secretary of State to the request from the three leaders in Sussex for this year's county council elections to be postponed, putting us in a sort of priority category. Now, if the Secretary of State says yes, and we postpone this year's county council elections, the leader's view, and it's my view too, is we can take that as near as damn it. I mean, I know there's many a slip twixt cup and lip, as the old saying goes, but I think then we are looking at major reorganisation throwing up all sorts of issues, which I can't help feeling should leave us somewhere involved. But as I say, I can't actually think at this stage what form that involvement should take. But I just feel such a massive reorganisation, with massive implications for the way this authority works in the interim up to what we now believe will be something like 2028 if the government extends the life of this council. We ought to be involved, but some thought needs to be given, I think, to what that involvement should be.
Thank you, Councillor Circus. Well, I'll bear it in mind, and if any members of the committee, or let's put it, any district councillor of this council has ideas, grateful to hear them. I mean, it would be quite amusing, I think, to summon the minister of whatever it is of DHCLG
that's
to come and talk to us. But I don't think he would actually do that. He'd probably send a minion, or they'd probably just ignore us. But if anybody's got any ideas or themes, I'd be grateful to hear. I'd rather not. So anyway, the work programme is for noting by members of the committee, and as I said, if anybody's got anything that they can think about, don't forget we still have a task and finish group waiting in the sidings. Once we finish, we'll probably start that one in the next month or two. So that's item 11. Item 12 is the Cabinet Forward Plan. This is for noting. You'll notice that there's quite a number of topics on the Cabinet on their work programme, which I didn't bring to overview and scrutiny because we only have so much time. And item 13 is urgent business. There is no urgent business. So I'd like to thank you for your forbearance and patience. I'm sorry the meeting went on for so long, but we actually did it under 2 hours, which I think is a pretty good result. Thank you for coming, and be safe going home. Thank you.